Alright, so let me tell you about one of the creepiest nights of my life. This happened about 3 years ago, and honestly, I still get chills just thinking about it. I was on a solo road trip, which looking back, probably wasn't the smartest idea. I had this grand plan to hit up all these small, out-of-the-way towns and just, I don't know, experience life or whatever. Anyway, one night I was driving through this ridiculously rural area. No streetlights, no gas stations, just miles of trees and darkness. Of course, because my luck is stellar, a massive thunderstorm rolls in. I mean, this thing was violent. Sheets of rain were slamming against my windshield, lightning lit up the sky every few seconds, and my car started hydroplaning. I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I knew I couldn't keep driving in that mess, but there was literally nowhere to stop. Just when I was about to start panicking, I saw a faint glow up ahead. As I got closer, I realized it was a house, a big old farmhouse with its porch light on. It looked like something straight out of a creepy movie, but I figured it was either pull over there or risk crashing. I parked in the muddy driveway, and before I could even psych myself up, this older guy opens the front door and waves me in. He looked normal enough. Probably in his late 50s, a little scruffy, wearing an old flannel shirt. He called out, "You can't stay out in this weather, come on in." His voice was friendly, but there was something about the way he smiled that felt off. Like his teeth were too white, too perfect for someone living way out here. But I didn't have a lot of options, so I grabbed my bag and ran inside. The house was exactly what you'd expect. Faded wallpaper, creaky floorboards, the whole deal. The guy introduced himself as Charlie and offered me a towel to dry off. He said I was welcome to stay the night since the storm wasn't letting up anytime soon. Again, super friendly, but the longer I stood there, the more I started to feel uneasy. For one, the house smelled weird, like mildew and something metallic. And there were these pictures on the walls, family portraits, I guess, but they were all just slightly wrong. Like the faces were blurred or the eyes looked too big. I brushed it off, thinking maybe the storm was just messing with my head. Charlie showed me to a guest room upstairs, and as I was settling in, he said something that made my stomach drop. He goes, "Don't worry if you hear noises tonight. This old house has a way of talking." Then he chuckled and walked away. I locked the door. At first, everything was quiet, just the sound of rain pounding against the windows. But around midnight, I heard it. A soft scratching noise, like fingernails on wood. It started somewhere downstairs and slowly moved closer, up the stairs, down the hall. I kept telling myself it was probably a tree branch or the wind, but then the doorknob started rattling. My heart was racing. I whispered, "Charlie," but there was no response. The rattling stopped, but then I heard this low, guttural growl. Not like an animal, it sounded almost human. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone, but of course there was no signal. The growling turned into this weird, wet gurgling sound, and then silence. I didn't sleep at all. I just sat there in the dark, clutching my phone like it was a weapon. When the sun finally came up, I decided to get the hell out of there. I didn't even care about being polite, I just wanted to leave. I crept downstairs, but when I reached the living room, I froze. Charlie was sitting in a chair, staring at me. His face was pale and his eyes looked dead. But the thing that freaked me out the most was his smile. It was wide, too wide, and his teeth were sharp. He tilted his head and said, "You're not supposed to leave." I bolted for the door, and I swear I could hear him laughing as I ran to my car. The tires spun in the mud, but I managed to get out of there. When I looked in the rear-view mirror, Charlie was standing on the porch, waving. His teeth were glinting in the sunlight, and for a split second I thought I saw someone, or something, standing behind him. I don't know what happened in that house, and I don't want to know. I just know I'll never take a random road trip again. And if you're ever stuck in a storm and see a lonely farmhouse, keep driving.
Hey, so let me tell you about something seriously creepy that happened to me a few months ago. I wasn't going to share this because, honestly, it still gives me the chills just thinking about it. But here we are, so buckle up. It all started when I moved into this old apartment downtown. The place was cheap, like suspiciously cheap, but I didn't ask too many questions. You know, broke life and all. The landlord gave me the usual quirks of old buildings speech. Things like creaky floors and weird drafts. I figured I could deal with it. The first couple of weeks were fine, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, I started hearing this faint tapping at night. It was so soft that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. I thought, probably just the pipes or something. Except, it always happened at the same time. 3:14 a.m. on the dot. Now, I'm not the kind of person who immediately jumps to ghost stories, but come on. Every night, the same time. It started to mess with my sleep. One night, I decided to figure out where the sound was coming from. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and followed the noise. It led me to this random corner of my bedroom where the walls meet. At first, I didn't see anything weird, just drywall and peeling paint. But when I pressed my ear against the wall, the tapping was louder. And then I noticed something. There was a slight gap in the baseboard, like the wall didn't quite meet the floor. At this point, I should have just backed off, but curiosity got the best of me. I grabbed a screwdriver and started prying at the baseboard. It popped off pretty easily, and underneath it was this tiny square door. It was so small that I would have never noticed it if I wasn't literally tearing the wall apart. Now, normal people would have stopped right there. But I've apparently never seen a horror movie, so I opened it. The smell hit me first. It was damp, musty, and just wrong. Like mildew mixed with something metallic. I aimed my flashlight inside and saw a crawl space. The walls were covered in this strange, dark staining. Here's where it gets weird. There were scratches, like claw marks, on the wood beams. Like, deep enough that you could tell whatever made them wasn't just passing through. I was freaked out, but too deep in it now. I crawled in a little further and saw something glinting in the light. It was a pile of coins, all old and tarnished. And next to the pile, a Polaroid photo. The photo was of a woman, maybe in her 30s, standing in a kitchen that looked eerily similar to mine. She was smiling, but her eyes, they looked terrified. Almost like she was forced to smile. Then I noticed the writing on the back of the photo. It said, "Help me. He's watching." My blood went cold. I noped out of that crawl space so fast, I practically ripped my pants on the way out. I slammed the little door shut and piled furniture in front of it like that would somehow stop whatever was going on. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan in the apartment felt amplified. But the tapping? It didn't come back. Instead, I started hearing something else. Faint whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded like they were coming from the walls. The next morning, I called the landlord, trying to play it cool. I asked if anyone had ever reported anything strange about the apartment. He got weirdly quiet and said, "You found the door, didn't you?" He didn't say much after that, just told me to leave it alone and hung up. I moved out a week later. I don't care if I lost my deposit or whatever. I still think about that photo sometimes, and I wonder if she got out, or if she's still stuck there, waiting for someone to listen.